Guys, we are live. It's Tuesday night, September 17th. You guys are listening to the Charm City Sideline podcast. Today, it's our week 3 Q&A episode, so you guys submitted questions to us, and we're going to get to all of them. But first of all, this is our first episode with a guest today. We got Sutton with
Hey, what's going on?
the Purple Rain podcast. How you doing, Sutton?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. So we're going to get right into it. First question here. So this one is from Brandon Wingfield. Sutton, we'll start with you. He asks, do you think the fan base is overreacting about our 0-2 start to the season?
I would say a resounding no. And the reason I say that is, a lot of people like to throw out the statistic that, teams that start 0 and 2 make the playoffs around like less than 15% of the time. But if you take it a step further and you expound on that a little bit, and you look at since 2020, the year 2020, when, the league expanded to 14 playoff teams, the only two teams actually have made the playoffs after starting 0 and 2 since 2020, since the expansion. That's 6.25% of the teams. So I mean,
Sure.
we're kind of stacked up against it right now. When you talk about the analytics, I don't know if you guys are like analytics guys real heavy, but the numbers they tend not to lie. Of course, there's more context to it than that, but if I had to say like, are they overreacting? No, because that game, I mean, I can understand losing to the Chiefs even if it's by a toe, but losing to the Raiders at home, that is inexcusable, especially with the meltdown that we saw in the fourth quarter. It was all too familiar, and for it to be happening as early as a week 2, I think that, the attention should be pointed at somebody. The blame should go to somebody. And I know the big name right now is John Harbaugh. I don't know if you guys are fire Harbaugh guys, but I am an advocate of his seat getting plenty warm. So I would say no to Brandon Wingfield. No overreacting.
What do you guys think?
I mean, looking at the high note, I believe the fan base is overreacting to some extent, and I totally understand it. Dropping a game against the Raiders at home for your home opener is a pretty brutal game to look past, but I do think they're overreacting, but I think it's pretty justified. This game, did not go our way, and this team has very high expectations beginning, going into the season. Super Bowl contenders, and it sucks dropping a game to that magnitude, week 2, and especially the way we dropped week 1 in Kansas City, losing by this much or whatever you want to say about that. And like Sutton just said, a lot of the blame's immediately going towards Coach Harbaugh. And I think that's justifiable as well. It's been a very questionable road so far through the first 2 weeks of these coaching decisions and stuff. And you can say it directly correlated to the Ravens losing the game, or you could go the other route and say it's not. I do think they're overreacting to some extent, a little more than they probably should, but it's a very long season. You have 17 games to play. We're through 2 of them. And I get the analytics, they say less than 15% of teams who start 0-2 can make the playoffs. However, like I said, this team's known to be a Super Bowl contender. It's not like we're a bad team. We know we're a very good team. We know we're going to win a ton of games this year, and we have 15 more games to prove that. You got a really tough stretch here coming up the next 3 weeks. So I guess it's a make or break period, and this team's got to show exactly what they're capable of. And I think we all know that they can do that. We've seen it plenty of times before. So it's going to be a big time test for the next 3 weeks, but it's a long season. So I think these fans just got to stay level headed and look towards one game at a time.
Yeah, somehow I side with Dawson here. I appreciate Sutton's reality check there. We definitely need that. But like I heard Torrey Smith talk about it. He said break down the season into 4 quarters. We're not even through the first half of the first quarter. And we're talking about firing Harbaugh. We're talking about trades we need to make, games that were so close to winning, and it seems like everyone's kind of like on fire running around. Like it's pretty crazy right now. And it's absolutely justified. I think these next 2 weeks being at Dallas and then against the Bills is scary. Like I think looking too far ahead is also dangerous for us, but overall I think I lean towards a little overreacting just because it's this early, but Sutton and those stats prove it. I mean, it's a low odds game that we're playing right now, and it's scary.
Yeah, I kind of agree with all 3 of you guys. I feel like even though we have different answers, we all kind of are in agreement. All in all, I would say, part of the overreaction for me is, and this kind of happens every year, but like the fire Harbaugh stuff. But at the same time, it is something that's come up before. In 2018, he was going to be gone if we didn't win that division and make the playoffs. And now it's 6 years later, and the only thing I'll say about it is, I would say there's at least 1 or 2 games every year where even the most neutral Ravens fans are kind of bringing the topic up of Harbaugh hot seat, and I think that happening already in week 2 is a little bit concerning. Also, I think the fact, the percentage about 0-2 teams making the playoffs, 11.5 since 1990. Sutton said, ever since the 14-team merger, only 2 teams have made it, I believe. So there's definitely a lot of concerns, and with the schedule coming up that we'll get into later, Cowboys, Bills, Bengals, it's going to be rough. So to get into the next question here, Sutton, we can start with you again. This one's from Madden Neal, I believe. He asks what your biggest concern is so far.
Definitely going to be, well, you know what? I want to say offensive line really badly, right? But kind of thinking about what we were just talking about in the previous question, John Harbaugh is my biggest concern about this team. And I know that seems like an overreaction, but hear me out. When we lost that game against the Raiders, did it not feel like other games we've lost in the past? I would agree that it does. And my thing is, after getting to an AFC Championship game last year, having a beautiful season, especially regular season, right? What did we learn? Did we learn not to beat ourselves? Obviously not. We're seeing a recurring theme of us losing games in similar ways. And so, like, above all else, a fish rots from the head down, right? And you can go all the way up to Steve Bisciotti on this one, but I'm going to stay at Harbaugh. It just doesn't seem like we are in a position with John Harbaugh to outcoach a lot of these teams, especially these Andy Reids. Especially, we couldn't even outcoach an Antonio Pierce. That's concerning. And I know it's only week 2, but that's what I would say is my number one priority, because like my guy Dawson said, like, we know we're going to win a lot of games this year. We know we're probably going to make the playoffs, and we might make a playoff run. But like, when the going gets tough and you need your coach to, like, quote unquote, what the kids like to say, like, stand on business, for lack of better words, right? And
Yes,
like,
sir.
show up, like, we need that to happen, and that hasn't happened in years past. So I would say John Harbaugh, and just kind of like the coaching overall, even when you look at like stuff from the last game, like the challenges, like little stuff like that, and like some of the play calling, how predictable it is. When us as Ravens fans, we can kind of like deduce what the Ravens are going to do on offense. I know we've all sat at home watching the games before, especially back in the Roman era, but kind of now in the Todd Monken era as well. Like, you can kind of predict where the Ravens are going to go next. If you watch this team enough, you kind of know what they want to do next with things. And just the coaching staff overall, I would say, is my number one concern. And, of course, the head of that is John Harbaugh. But after that, I would say O-line. But I want to hear what you guys say, too.
Yeah, and something to add to what you said, I feel like you kind of pointed it out too. Like, probably the first thing to say is O-line, but when you really look at it, O-line might be the concern because of Harbaugh's decision making, with playing Falele at guard over what we think Ben Cleveland, who has looked good in his starts. So that's one thing I wanted to point out there. The other thing, talking about being outcoached. We were not outcoached by Kyle Shanahan when Mike McDonald was here. We were not outcoached by Sean McVay when Mike McDonald was here. We were not outcoached by Mike McDaniel when Mike McDonald was here. We weren't even outcoached by Andy Reid when Mike McDonald was here. And I know that was a really hot topic. Do we move on from Harbaugh to keep McDonald? That's another question later, so we can get into that about what the decision making was there. But I just wanted to add those 2 things in. I would tend to agree with you in terms of Harbaugh. Obviously, the O-line, the talent is not what you'd like it to be, but it definitely could be better with the players we have on the roster, with a different group of guys in there. Dawson, we can go with you next.
Yeah, I think Sutton nailed it right on the head. Obviously, the immediate concern, people are like, offensive line, that's obviously a work in progress. But I think, like you guys mentioned as well, it directly correlates to coaching with John Harbaugh. I mean, you got a guy in Daniel Falele out there who's very questionable at that spot right now. And a lot of people are calling for Ben Cleveland and stuff, and that's a coaching decision. Harbaugh has the faith in Falele that he has, and that's the reason he's out there. But I mean, Harbaugh is a veteran head coach. He's one of the longest tenured head coaches in the NFL. I think year 16 or 17 now. And the fact that he's still getting out coached by guys who are in their first or second season of head coaching is just, to me, it's ridiculous. I mean, you got veteran head coaches all across the league, not to the magnitude of John Harbaugh with how long he's been with one team, but guys like Mike Tomlin, Andy Reid, those guys you don't see getting out coached on a yearly basis, multiple games, losing games that they should not. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we see in Baltimore with John Harbaugh on a yearly basis. There's multiple games every year that you can go back, win or loss, that you can immediately point out that John Harbaugh got out coached. And unfortunately, a lot of them end in us losing. And just the fact that he's 16 years in and that's still happening. And I'm not saying it's always happened, but in most recent years, it's happened a lot more than it probably should. I think that's got to be my biggest concern, because clearly what we're seeing is it doesn't matter how good your team is and how much better your team is than the other team on the other side of the field that you're playing. You will still lose a game if your coaching is, not up to speed that day or in general. Like, I'm being honest. Anyone would agree. The Ravens are a significantly better team than the Las Vegas Raiders are. I think anybody should agree with that. But we didn't play our game and we got outcoached and we lost that game. So I think, yeah, you can have a concern over the offensive line or the play calling or whatever it may be right now with this team. But I think the ultimate concern has to be the coaching, because it does not matter how good we are. If the coaching keeps up to this rate that it's at right now, we're not going to win. There's going to be a couple more games that we lose this season, at least, that we should definitely win. So I think you guys nailed it on the head, and I think I'm just doubling down on it. I think the coaching easily has to be the biggest concern.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different direction with this, even though I completely agree with you guys. I think O-line's probably the biggest concern, and Harbaugh kind of follows it. But I was really thrown off with the secondary's play last week. I think Devontae Adams and Bowers had their way with us, and there was about nothing we could do.
Yeah.
I think that's scary going into next week too. Brandon Cooks and CeeDee are phenomenal. They're really good wide receivers that are going to tear us up. And if we don't game plan really well for them, like we haven't truly been with people like Rashee Rice and Devontae and Bowers, we could get torched. Like, this is a scary topic now, because if we could have control of a game by 10 points and they just decide, all right, we're going to go to Devontae every single play down the field. Oh, Bowers, play action? Yeah, sure. Dump it down. Let's keep going and roll down the field, roll our defense. And it's just concerning. I think like people like Kelsey, week one, there was kind of like a secret sauce that we might have unlocked, and that translated into next week. He didn't have a big night, but there's something off with it. Maybe it's or in the start of the season kind of vibes, but that was definitely concerning to me. I don't know about you guys, but it was kind of just off to see our secondary and how elite we hold them play that kind of stingy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And if you watch, I think the all 22 from that game dropped yesterday. So a lot of the beat writers have been like posting it online and stuff. I've been on X looking at it. And I think it was Ryan Mink who posted it was a drive that the Raiders had in the fourth quarter, and Gardner Minshew was just getting whatever he wanted through the air. Like you were mentioning, Zach, to what's his name? Brock Bowers, who I was saying even before the game, we had to keep this guy in check, and we didn't. 9 catches for 98 yards and almost had a touchdown. I actually thought he might have got in on that play. That's just me. But he was just getting whatever he wanted. And like you said, Zach, that was scary. That was scary to look at, man. And it was just wow. Now, no, what I do think is that, in that Chiefs game, I think that we had so much kind of riding on that emotionally, right? And then kind of losing that game was kind of like an energy dump. And then we come back a little bit flat, expecting to beat a team at home in our home opener. And we just, we came out kind of, I don't want to say we came out flat, because I thought, the offense never really got the rhythm. The defense was bending but not breaking throughout the whole first half, which I thought was good. But we just never really found our groove. And I think moving forward, I think we'll be better. Like against the Cowboys this week. First of all, I hate that we're playing at 4:00. I hate the 4:00 so much. But it's gonna be cool hearing Tom Brady talk about the team. But I think we'll be a lot better than we were against the Raiders. I don't know how we're going to deal with CeeDee Lamb. I don't know who's going to check him. I don't know if they're going to put a Brandon Stevens or Marlon Humphrey on him. It's going to be very interesting to see what Zach Orr decides there, and ultimately John Harbaugh as well. But yeah, man, just to your point again, Zach, like the fact that they were getting whatever they wanted, through the air, it was terrible to watch. And like just the difference between our secondary and our run defense right now is literally night and day. Like the best run defense in the league and the worst pass defense in the league. That cannot happen, and we need to get it together.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys just said. We got another question here. Zach, we can start with you. They say, can Ben Cleveland really be that bad that he's not good enough to start over Falele? And just some other questions surrounding it. Bros 931. When does the Falele experiment end? And you guys' thoughts on Harbaugh saying that Ben didn't earn the spot?
Yeah, I kind of want to tackle that last question first. I think it's kind of like a Ravens Harbaugh thing to do, maybe to like spark a fire under someone. I feel like Cleveland definitely showed everyone that he's capable of starting, and Falele must have just, outworked him in training camp and preseason stuff. I mean, shoot, if he has earned it, he absolutely deserves it. I just think that what we've seen from Ben Cleveland is like, how does this add up? Like, where did we go wrong? And just as fans watching it. And I think someone like Harbaugh kind of saying that in a press conference, being asked about it directly, like, hey, why isn't Cleveland getting the shot at it? Him kind of saying, Ben needs to earn it. Like, it was kind of a direct call. I don't feel like he would say that, given another elite player, if they were kind of like slowing down, unless he were trying to bring them back up, like as a player coach that he is. I think it was kind of a thing like that, at least in my head. That's what I kind of read it as. But overall, I'm just not that blown away by Falele yet, and I want to see Cleveland given a shot for sure.
What do we
Yeah,
think,
I think it's crazy.
Dawson? Yeah.
I want to add to that question too, is that I think this is a very interesting, fulfilled question you can definitely answer. And a lot of people, this is kind of the topic of the town right now. I'm going to start with the last question as well about Harbaugh saying Ben didn't earn the spot. Personally, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I'm all for the summer camp battles and stuff. Obviously guys got to fight for the spot and earn it. Of course, nobody's given anything. You got a right tackle competition right now with Patrick McCary and Roger Rosengarten. My issue is you got the rotation going. Why can't we have a right guard rotation? Why can't you have Daniel Falele and Ben Cleveland in their rotating snaps just to see who truly deserves it more? Why is Falele playing every snap at right guard and the other guys are rotating next to him? Personally, I'm not a fan of the rotating stuff at all. I think you got to put one guy in there and just let them develop and just play and build that chemistry. But what we've all seen from Daniel Falele so far has been not to be hard, but just a disaster. It's been bad. The offensive line is falling apart on the right side, and a huge part of that is what we got going on at right guard. And I mean, we saw what happened in the second half on Sunday against the Raiders once we put in Roger Rosengarten. I mean, Max Crosby was easily wrecking the game and taking it over for Las Vegas in the first half. And it seemed like in the second half, he only had a few plays that I can think of off the top of my head that he genuinely took control of. I mean, I think Roger Rosengarten did a great job taking care of him, but at the same time, Daniel Falele was just getting wrecked. I feel like the entire game, there was not many snaps you could take away from watching this film that were genuinely impressive or encouraging for the future at the right guard. I think at this point it's a no-brainer to give Ben Cleveland a shot. I can't imagine what more is to it as to why he's not getting a chance. I don't know if it's Harbaugh with one of these personal vendetta, Harbaugh's doghouse type ordeals that we've seen in the past with Tyson Williams. Maybe there's something there we don't know about, but it's hard to think because realistically, I don't know how much worse you can get with a starting right guard right now. No offense to him, that you have with Daniel Falele. I think Ben Cleveland easily deserves a spot right now. And what's the worst that can happen? You put him out there and he's bad. I mean, and what's the worst that can happen with it? I think the Falele experiment has to end soon, especially if he doesn't show improvement. I don't think you can keep trotting an offensive line out there every week getting Lamar killed, especially when you're going against guys like Micah Parsons this week, who's arguably a top 3 pass rusher in the NFL with these. I would probably argue he's number 2. So good luck to the offensive line this week, and I think you have to put Rosengard in that right tackle, and I think you have to give Ben Cleveland a shot because if you don't, I don't really know what you're doing. And I mean, you got to at least see the guy in game action. And all I'm going to say to end this is last year we saw him a few games to end the season at right guard. Um, or I think, yeah, right guard. And it wasn't even bad. He wasn't no Marshall Yanda type, but he wasn't moving backwards. I mean, it was a serviceable position. And I don't know what's happened since where Harbaugh has decided just to not even give him a chance.
Yeah, yeah. No, I have to concur with you, Dawson, on that. I do think it's a little bit ridiculous the fact that John Harbaugh would come out and say, that he hasn't earned the spot. He didn't beat anybody out for it. And it's like, okay, while that might be true, like you said again, what can be worse than what Daniel Falele is putting on tape right now? And like you said, there's not a whole lot of positive like pass pro or run blocking reps to take away from it. And with that being said, if Ben Cleveland, if John Harbaugh really believes that Ben Cleveland could not do a better job than what Daniel Falele put on tape on Sunday against the Raiders, why is Ben Cleveland on my team? Point blank, period. Like why is he not on the practice squad till he gets better, or why is he not somewhere else? Why is he still waiting in the wings? I just don't understand that, and I think it's a little bit disingenuous of Harbaugh to say that. I would have much preferred if he just came out and said, you know what, we're gonna go back, we're gonna look at the tape 2, 3, 4 times over, and then we're gonna make the best decision for the team. I'd have been okay with that. But to go out there and like Zach said, it was a direct shot pretty much at Ben Cleveland, like, hey, get your stuff together. But Harbaugh is the one who needs to get his stuff together because like we cannot afford to keep letting these guys live in our backfield. Like you mentioned, we've got who do we got next? The Cowboys, Micah Parsons, and we've got the Bills, Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, and then we've got Trey Hendrickson and company. It's just it doesn't get any better, So like you have to make adjustments, and you have to make adjustments fast, or else this season's going to get away from us really, really quickly. And like I said before, like since 2020, only 6% of teams, and I don't mean to dive into the analytics too much, but only 6% of teams have made the playoffs after starting 0-2. Imagine starting 0-3 or 0-4, and that's due mainly to the offensive line being incompetent. So that's my take on it. I thought that what John Harbaugh said was ridiculous, and I definitely think that it's time for a switch, or at least, like you said, Dawson, a rotation. We're seeing it at right tackle. Why can't we see that same rotation happening at right guard? I think that Ben Cleveland at least deserves that, and Falele has deserved. He's earned kind of that as well, like being rotated. So that's kind of what I think on the matter, man. Offensive line is a mess right now, especially that right side. I mean, there's a couple silver linings on the left side. Voorhees is doing a pretty good job right now holding it down. Stanley's having a good season so far, and Linderbaum is Linderbaum. But that right side needs to be addressed and quickly.
Yeah, there's a good comment right here. Falele should have been cut as soon as we moved on from Greg Roman. He's not a guard or a tackle in this offense, coaching malpractice. That's something I agree with. It's something I've seen a lot of people say. Falele is a Greg Roman tackle. We drafted Falele when we had Greg Roman, and I just don't think he fits a Todd Monken offense. And I think he's even a worse fit at guard than he is at tackle. With that said, I don't know if you guys agree with me. Would you guys say that Falele is probably going to be the right guard on Sunday, right? That's kind of what it seems like.
I don't know.
Unfortunately, yeah.
If I had to put money on it.
If I had to put money on it, I would say with Harbaugh's pride, yes. He will start at right guard, but I do think he'll be willing to rotate him if he struggles early, which I respect. So yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah, and then so let's say Falele is playing week 3. I think that's even that's even worse than just having it saying he beat out Ben Cleveland when Ben Cleveland didn't even play right guard in camp or in the preseason. He played center and a little bit of left guard. So I don't really know, and no one really knows what he's talking about when he says that, because Ben Cleveland played 2 games last year and he was good. He wasn't just like average, like he played well in those 2 games last year at right guard. And there's a tweet from Spencer Schultz over at the X52 podcast that I just wanted to point out here. He says, Ben Cleveland was never given a chance to compete at right guard throughout camp. They had him playing center and elsewhere. And that Harbaugh deferred to their evaluation of Daniel beating out Ben, but Ben was never even in consideration. And that real evaluation is now 2 games of Daniel playing right guard and 5 games of Ben playing right guard. And he adds on at the end, maybe use real NFL games as evaluation, training camp, which I agree with. I don't understand, and I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on this, why he's saying he lost the battle when there wasn't a battle.
That's what I'm saying, dude. It's like this personal vendetta thing. He's got a weird outlook on certain battles, and we've seen it before in the past. Like, there's legitimately, to our knowledge, of course, we're not within the team, we're not in the facility, we're not on the field with these guys. Obviously, we're just fans. But to our knowledge, there's never been anything where it's stone cold, like, all right, Ben Cleveland's terrible. Like, he's not the answer. Like, we move on. He's not the starter. Like, yeah, there's bad reps with everything. We've seen bad reps with all of our offensive linemen. Trust me, we've seen plenty. But there's never been like a consistent strand, I feel like, with Ben Cleveland in the limited time we've seen him actually start and play meaningful football snaps. That was an immediate response of like, no, he's not playing. He can't play. To my knowledge, I can't think of any. Falele now, 2 weeks, in a row, we've seen that. So it's like, yeah, he's probably going to be the starter this week down in Dallas. He's probably going to be the starting right guard. However, like Sutton said, I hope that Harbaugh, if Falele starts off rough, he, leans to go towards that rotation and at least gives Ben Cleveland a shot. And I will respect that. We're not big Harbaugh fans at the moment, but I would respect that because at least that's showing that you care and you're trying to make a difference and you're open to a change if it helps the team. But if you leave Falele out there for 60 minutes and he gets carved up and you don't even, bat an eye at Ben Cleveland or anyone else, I mean, I don't even know what to tell you at that point. That is just coaching malpractice, if anyone's ever seen it, and that is just poor game management. I mean, at this point, I was thinking about it earlier today. Call me crazy, but I think Roger Rosengarten should be the starting right tackle this week in Dallas. I think he needs to be the starter from snap one to the last snap of the game. Throw him out there and let him develop. That's why you drafted him, and possibly put Patrick McCarry at right guard. I mean, how much worse could you get? McCarry. I mean,
That's a
we've
good
seen
point.
McCarry play everywhere across the line. And yeah, he's not doing great at right tackle right now to begin the season, but I'm pretty sure he's played guard before and he was serviceable. I mean, at what point, you gotta try some other alternative. And I think McCarry at right guard and Roger Rosengard at right tackle this week, I think would be a good start. So we'll see what happens, but I mean, we've got to see some changes to be made with this coaching staff if things trend in the same direction as it did this week down in Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree with you guys anymore. Charles Harris, never seen Harbaugh with this much heat. Another question here. This one's kind of interesting, kind of more of a fantasy question. Not fantasy football, just doesn't seem too likely. But Sutton, we can start with you here. Hunter asks, would you consider trading Mark Andrews if it meant getting a high draft pick or a starting guard?
No, no, I would not. I would not trade him. I think he has one more year with us after this year before his contract is up. And then I feel like if Isaiah Likely continues to perform the way that he is, then we will probably move on from Mark Andrews. And that's just kind of business, right? It wouldn't be anything personal. I think that he can go somewhere else and thrive. And I don't even want that to happen. Maybe they do sign him. It all depends on what Todd Monken does with these two tight end sets. Can he find not even balance, but harmony, having both of those guys on the field, like being able to make something work because balance would assume that it would be like 50%, like 50-50, and that's not necessarily what we need. I think they both have different skill sets, right? I like to use the analogy for Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, the truck and the stallion. Like the truck being Mark Andrews, like you can get him the ball, he's going to rumble down the field, he's going to take a couple of guys with him. But the stallion, Isaiah Likely, he's a little bit more shifty. He can make a guy miss, and once he gets running, like he's got very long strides. He's a tall guy. What is he, like 6'4", 6'5"? He's a tall guy, right? So is Mark Andrews, but that's besides the point. But like I said, again, I wouldn't trade Mark Andrews right now because I feel like he can really, really get going. And we know historically he's always been Lamar Jackson's favorite target, man. So I think that once they start to get their chemistry back, which it may happen this weekend. It started last weekend. Mark Andrews, he had more catches than Isaiah Likely, 4-2. And Andrews had he had some pretty good plays in there, had some pretty good runs. I think as he's getting a little bit warm, and as he didn't finish last season, so he's kind of still getting his sea legs underneath him for, getting back to football speed. But I definitely think he will, and we won't be asking these types of questions in maybe like 3 or 4 weeks. But no, I wouldn't trade him. I would probably wait until his contract is up, and if likely keeps performing, then we move him for business purposes.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sutton. I think he nailed that right on the head. Would I consider it? Possibly. Would I do it? Probably not. I think to even consider and even want to be near pulling the trigger to send Mark Andrews elsewhere, I think you have to for sure get like a star guard. You're gonna have to get a star player at a position that you desperately need right now across the offensive line, or a really good draft pick. But that's Lamar's guy. Mark Andrews is a Baltimore man. Like he's everything to this team, man. And I don't think they would trade him. I think, like Sutton said, they wait till his contract's ending and they wait and see, what's going on with how Isaiah Likely's performing. If he's still balling out and he's, this really good tight end, then unfortunately, I think it's a business decision, like Sutton said, and they move on. But there's no hate there, no bad blood. It's just a business move, and it would be peace to both parties. And we wish him the best, and he'd probably go and thrive elsewhere because that's who he is. He's a fantastic tight end. But I do like what Sutton said towards the end right there. I don't think people remember Mark Andrews suffered a pretty gruesome ankle injury last year. I mean, that is a bad injury, especially because he came back quick too. Like that was, I realistically that was probably a season-ending injury, but he fought his ass off through rehab or recovery and stuff and got him back out there for the AFC Championship. But that's a brutal injury, especially for a tight end, of course, any playmaker receiver across the offense. So I think come 5 weeks from now, I think you're going to see a much better, much different Mark Andrews because right now, I mean, he's probably not 100% to be honest with you. He's probably pretty close, but he probably, if you ask him, does not feel 100% as far as like mobility and running. So it probably feels a little odd to him with that brutal injury. But I mean, 5 weeks from now, we're going to see a much better, much faster, much like his old self of Mark Andrews. And I don't think anyone's going to be asking this question because I think we're all going to sit back and look at the phenomenal 1-2 punch we have at tight end and just enjoy it because it's going to help this offense tremendously down the stretch, especially when Andrews gets back to full health.
Zach, got anything?
No, these two nailed it. That was perfectly put. Mark's great. I just don't think I could move him for a pick right now or a guard.
Cool. So another question. This is an interesting one. Jacob Ham. We'll go back to Dawson here to start. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would the panic meter be if the Ravens dropped this next game to the Cowboys, fall to 0-3?
Well, I will say, knowing the Ravens flock, the panic meter would be absolutely scorching 10 if we lose this game. If we drop to 0-3, this fan base is going to be brutal. That's just what it's going to be. If we go 0-3 and drop this game in Dallas, it's going to be a rough start. Fans are going to have no hope. The team's going to be calling for the firing of Harbaugh. It's just going to be brutal. But realistically, if we lose, I do agree. I think it's pretty bad. Dropping to 0-3 immediately, that's just you're playing an analytics game like we mentioned previously in the start of this, that it's going to be a tough uphill battle fighting all season long. Just because realistically, if you start 0-3 in the AFC playoff picture, you're probably only allowed 6 losses, I would say. Any more than that, I think you're really just hoping for the best, and I don't think it's possible. So realistically, if the Ravens start 0-3, it's gonna be brutal because they're gonna have to basically win, every game remaining, and they're gonna be only be able to afford a couple more losses. But they got to at one point solidify themselves as this contender they're supposed to be and prove themselves that they can win these big games. And Dallas is a huge game this week. I mean, Dallas is a very good team, and it's not like we're playing the Raiders, who we laid a goose egg to. This is a big test, and this is a big opportunity for this team to kind of punch the other team in the mouth and kind of say, hey, we're not going nowhere. We're still here, and we're going to win a ton of games this year. So deservingly so, if we do lose this game, the panic meter should be very high because the standards for this team are set very high and the expectations are a lot better than what would be an 0-3 start. But I don't think we lose this game, but we'll get more into that later this week. But I think deservingly so, if we drop to 0-3, the panic meter will be very high, and I think it should be very high.
We'll go Zach, then Sutton.
Yeah, I'm only going to say 9 because I think there's a chance that if they drop this game, they could lose the next one to the Bills. So I'm leaving room in case because it could probably get worse. But gosh, I'm nervous for this game. It's kind of it would be the reality check of this being maybe the first bad season we've seen from a Lamar Jackson led team. And it's kind of scary to think about, like the intensity of this game. I think like, if you think about, week 1, we could see Lamar on the sideline, kind of getting up in his offensive line's face, like being vocal, being a leader. And I think we're going to need to see that on another level. We're going to see that and more, on Sunday, because it's going to take a big effort to steer the ship in the right direction. And yeah, the panic meter would be quite high.
Yeah, I mean, and as it should be. I'm gonna go with 10. I'm already like at kind of like an 8, to be honest with you. Kind of because of halfway because of the analytics, but also because I'm just not used to the Ravens starting 0-2. You know, first time in 9 years since 2015 that we've started this bad, and like you said, Zach, like it kind of poses the threat of this being the first bad Lamar Jackson season. Not necessarily bad from him playing wise, but just he leads the team. Um, I think that losing this game against the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't want to put it into the air, speak it into existence, but like if we were to lose that game, it would be catastrophic. And the main reason I say that is because look at the AFC North. If you look at our division directly, the Steelers are 2-0, right? The Browns have a win. Luckily, the Bengals are 0-2 as well. But we are going to literally have to win every single divisional game. If we're going to be dropping games against random, NFC teams, when do we lose to NFC teams? Like, that's how you know we
Never.
need to hit the panic button. We've lost
Once.
to one NFC team underneath Lamar Jackson, and we all know what that game was. I won't even bring it up. But but yeah, man, I think that deservedly so. If the Ravens were to lose this game against the Cowboys coming up, then yeah, you can go ahead and take it to 10. You can hit the panic button. Yeah.
I do want to have a quick comment on the intensity level of this game. Like, I forget, one of you just mentioned that. It's going to be through the roof. I mean, this Cowboys team just laid a goose egg at home against New Orleans, and they're going to come out firing, man. They know what this game means to them, and they know what it means to us. And this team, obviously, we're trying to get in the win column. We're trying to get out, get on foot this season. So the intensity level of this game is going to be through the roof. Both teams are going to be absolutely lit on fire. And this game means everything to both teams, because if Dallas loses, it's going to be, oh, same old Cowboys, can't do it, and stuff. And if we lose, we're going to be 0-3. And then it's just a huge uphill battle, especially like Sutton just said, in a tough division so far this season. Only 2 weeks in, of course, but 2-0 Steelers, like, they don't lose many games. So a 2-0 start for them is not encouraging for us to see. And we always, I feel like, split with the division. We're always going to drop at least a couple divisional games. It's just how it works. We, for some reason, can't win against Pittsburgh in recent years, and we always split with Cleveland and Cincy, I feel like. So, yeah, if you start 0-3, I mean, that it's going to be very tough to make the playoffs. I feel like, or just, I'm sorry, contend for the playoffs, and God forbid make the playoffs, because you also have two very tough games late in the season. And I'm not overlooking anybody, because clearly we just learned our lesson again with that. But looking at Houston and Philadelphia late in the season as games we got to play, that's brutal. So this team's got to win this week, and they've got to start stacking these wins, because it does not get any easier, and it's the NFL, so it's any given week. So this team's got to come out and make a freaking statement this weekend and get back in the win column, because it's been far too long, and this team's better than that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree with everything you guys said. I think Sutton talking about like the analytics and the numbers and stuff. Already 0-2, it's tough to make the playoffs. 0-3 would be insane, and then you'd have the Bengals and the Bills. I think Sutton. The three of us were talking about this before the show. I think we would all take 2 and 3 if you would agree with that. After these 3 games, you take 2 of them, and then you got some easy games after that. But so it's like if you lose to the Cowboys, you absolutely have to beat the Bills and the Bengals. That's kind of how I look at it.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. If we came out of that stretch 2-3, then that would be ideal, to be honest with you, because it's a brutal 3 games. And when you look at the primary weaknesses of our teams, the teams that we're playing, they can exploit that. Like we said, I mean, all 3 of these teams have a viable pass rush, and we do not have a good offensive line right now. Like it's just not. If you look at the analytics for offensive line, it actually says that the pass protection is a lot better than what we're giving it credit for. But we watch the games, right? We have eyes. That's one of those things where I'm calling the analytics BS. And it's just 2-3. I wouldn't like it, right? I'd rather us go on a 3-game stretch and we're off to the races, right? Because that's what I'm used to. I'm not used I'm not used to the Ravens starting 0-2. It's just not. It's not conducive for a good season. It's just not, and the numbers say that. So, but yeah, I agree. 2-3 would be ideal. It's fair.
Yeah, and just to go over some comments here, I think at this point Harbaugh doesn't want to face the backlash he would get if Cleveland goes in there and balls out. I thought that was kind of funny. Even I would probably disagree with that, but it's a funny comment nonetheless. And then I guess we can talk about this for just a little bit. You guys more worried about Tucker and Stout both having rough days, or the pass defense so far?
I want to answer this question.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there is concern right now for Tucker, but at the same time, he's the greatest kicker, I think, in the league still, arguably of all time. Kickers go through slumps. It's not an uncommon thing to see kickers in the league, no matter how great they are, go through little mid-career slumps. We've seen it in the past with players, or with kickers, I'm sorry. So my immediate concern with Tucker is not high. I don't worry about him. Yes, a little more than in the past, because back then you could just leave the room and he's going to drill a 56-yarder. But nowadays it's almost like, oh crap, we got to watch this. I'm not exactly concerned with Jordan Stout. I mean, we've seen him. He's a pretty good punter. He's still young, so he's going through growing pains, I guess you could say still. And just that game all around was just crazy against the Raiders. Like Tucker misses a field goal, Jordan Stout like absolutely whiffs a punt. Like things were happening. It's just one of those games that we've seen in the past. But I do like the Zach Orr mention in this comment, because I just saw a thing on Twitter earlier. If you look at Mike McDonald's first couple games in Baltimore as a DC, our pass defense was horrific the first couple weeks. I don't know if people realize that. I think we played like the Jets and the Bills, and our pass defense
Dolphins.
was horrific, and our run defense was really good, just like it is right now. The first 2 weeks under Zach Orr. It's the exact same situation. It's kind of creepy how close it is. And I'm not comparing them. These are two completely different defensive coordinators again. But I don't think it's fair to overreact with this defense the first couple of weeks, especially because people thought the secondary was going to be lights out. But I don't think it's an immediate concern, because when Mike McDonald became DC the first like 4 weeks, people were literally saying the Ravens messed up. He should be fired. He doesn't need to be the guy moving forward. And then obviously we all saw what Mike McDonald turned into as DC in Baltimore. He was great. Zach Orr is 100% going through growing pains as DC. It's going to happen. It's his first year. He's very young. So we're going to see growing pains. And we're going to see growing pains with the team too, because there's a lot of guys who kind of got thrown into a position this year. And we're going to see growing pains. It's just part of how the NFL works. So if you're going to ask me, out of all three of those, the one that I have the most concern about, which I know that wasn't exactly the comment, I would probably say it's Justin Tucker. But like I said, I'm not concerned over that. And I'm definitely not concerned about the defense moving forward. I think the defense is going to be great this season, and I think that's going to be the least of our worries.
Anyone else got
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Tuck, I tend to agree with Dawson. I tweeted it the other day, like, I'm not gonna hit the panic button too early on him, but I definitely do think that he's kind of lost that automat Tuck moniker that, he was given by Ravens fan, over all these years. But hopefully it is just a slump. I didn't really see it that way, Dawson. I was just thinking maybe he's just getting old and this is what happens, but I'm hoping that you're right, and I'm hoping that it's a slump. When it comes to Jordan Stout being a young guy, and John Harbaugh being a special teams coach, it's almost 10 p.m. right now. John Harbaugh probably got Jordan Stout punting footballs right now. I'm telling you, like right now, as we speak. But so I think he'll be okay. And then when it comes to Zach Orr and the defense, you make a great point, Doss. I mean, like when Mike McDonald got here, and you brought it up, Bradley, that Dolphins game, 7 touchdowns from Tua Tagovailoa in that game, man, and just busted coverage after busted coverage after. You had a rookie Kyle Hamilton, you had a rookie Jalen Armour-Davis who was out there, and there were a couple of miscues, right? So there was certainly blame to go around, but yeah, those first couple of weeks, there were definitely people calling for Mike McDonald's job, which of course was way too premature in hindsight. But yeah, man, I tend to agree with pretty much everything you just said.
Anything to add, Zach?
No, that was perfect.
It was
Cool.
like crazy how bad people wanted Mike McDonald
Yeah.
gone. Like it was like 3 games and people were like literally raging, like
Yeah.
fire him now. And I'm like, dude, he's played 3 games. He's been 3 games as defensive
Give him a
coordinator.
little,
Like let's calm down and give the guy at least a quarter of a season to figure it out. Like no coaches come in day one and just wreck. Like it just doesn't, especially as a coordinator, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, just to add a random thing that's not about the Ravens at all, like I'm seeing people talk about like, is Caleb Williams a bust? He's played 2 games and he hasn't even been that bad. He's just made a couple rookie mistakes. I'm like, what is going on?
Into Houston, like Houston, a top 5 team. Like he had to go into Houston
I know.
and go without Keenan Allen. Like the dude's not going to go throw for 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, and his O-line sucks too.
Yeah,
so that's never good for a rookie. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we got 3 more questions. I feel like we kind of saved the 3 most interesting ones for last. The first one from dos.ty. We can start with Zach here. Why did we keep Harbaugh instead of moving him upstairs or firing him and making McDonald the head coach? What was your opinion on that at this time, guys? And then how do you feel about it now?
At the time, it just felt right. Like it seems like, our organization is kind of by the book, and being by the book has got us to where we are now. Very successful, winning organization year after year, finding, good players. And it starts with Harbaugh. Harbaugh's been a part of it for as long as I've been a fan. You sadly just have to keep him, even though you see all that potential in Mike, just because Harbaugh has these connections with these players, with Lamar, with the entire organization. It's just kind of like, even now where we see him in this bad light, at that time, getting to the conference championship was all we could ask for. Like, it's like we were right there. We were given the shot right there to beat him. And we kind of we were a fumble away, a few plays away. And I think Harbaugh has also had his fair share of good coordinators that have also moved on to different jobs, and it just made sense. McDonald is as great of a DC as I've seen in Baltimore, and I wish him the best with Seattle. They're already starting pretty hot. But yeah, I think it just started with the fact that, Harbaugh is our guy. He's our identity as a fan base and as a organization. And it would just be ridiculous, honestly, to say, hey, we're actually going to go with the guy under you for the future. Just kind of crazy.
Yeah, I agree, Zach. That's a good point. Especially with the team that just made the AFC Championship. Like, you would never see a team just boot the guy out the door when you were 1 game away from a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. I wish I could tell you why Harbaugh's still here, to be honest with you, because I think after the 2019 season and after last season, I think those are just situations where you could potentially move on from a coach because you had a fantastic team. And if you had any shot to win a Super Bowl, it was those years. And we didn't even make the Super Bowl at all. So I don't know why they didn't opt to go younger. I wish I could tell you, but I think a good point is what Zach mentioned, how with Harbaugh, you know what you're getting. It's continued success. It's consistent every single year. You know you're going to be a winning team. You know you're going to be atop the league. Who knows what's going to happen once you get to the playoffs, whether you're going to make it or not, further into the playoffs. But I think the Ravens value the culture a lot, which understandably so, they should. Because he obviously brings a great culture to the team. You've seen like tens and tens and tens, just tons of people comment on the Ravens culture and organization, even after they're not with the Ravens anymore, of how great of a coach Harbaugh is and how much they care for their players and how they're just that great of an organization, to their players. And obviously they care about that a lot. And I think that's a big part of why Harbaugh's still here 16 years later, just because every year in and year out, it's been that continued success and culture building and just great establishment with the identity of a team. Win or lose, whether they make the Super Bowl or not, I think the Ravens appreciate having a coach like that, which they should. But at the end of the day, you have a fantastic team, and at one point, you're going to have to pull the cord and just try to compete and be one step more and go to a Super Bowl and hopefully win it. Especially when you have a fantastic team on paper. I don't know necessarily if I would have wanted Mike McDonald as the head coach of this team, because I more so want like an offensive minded guy. I know Mike McDonald's a fantastic coach, but I think eventually, if we move on from Harbaugh, whether it's after this season or 2 years from now or whatever, I think undoubtedly we have to go after an offensive guy just to utilize Lamar and, these offensive assets we have to a maximum capability.
Yeah, and I feel like to this point, like I agree with everything you said. To this point, John Harbaugh's been to a couple AFC Championship games. He's literally won a Super Bowl, so he's kind of made a name in Baltimore. And I really like your point about the culture that he's built here. It's super consistent and it's really safe. Like sticking with Harbaugh was always the safe pick, rather than just going with a Mike McDonald. That it just wouldn't make any sense, like Zach said, to pick the guy underneath him. Now, what I will say is this: John Harbaugh, if the Ravens do not make not the Super Bowl, but if they do not make the playoffs this season, he needs to go. He needs to go. And the main reason I say that is because one, I do believe that an offensive-minded head coach would do wonders for this team in Lamar Jackson-led offense. But more importantly, I don't think that John Harbaugh did himself any favors by making it to another AFC Championship game last year. And the reason I say that is because now that that's the bar, we're looking to go higher. Me and Alex, Simply AS10, on our last podcast episode, we had said that not our last podcast episode, but like last season, we were saying that it was AFC Championship game or bust. Now we've made it to the AFC Championship game. We're expecting to go a step further to the Super Bowl. So anything less than that, especially missing the playoffs, is unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable. And don't quote me on this, but I do believe that this is John Harbaugh's last year on his contract. Is that true?
I think that's right.
I saw that on X now today. Someone replied that he actually has 2 left, but who knows which person was correct. I didn't look it up, so
Yeah, I got to look that up. But yeah, I mean, whether it's this year or next year, I think the seat should be getting hot because, like we all remember, back in 2018, one of you guys mentioned it earlier, his seat was definitely getting hot before Lamar came, and Lamar kind of came and took over and saved the job. But we still see some of the same miscues that we've seen year in and year out, like losing games like we lost last week to the Raiders, or just getting grossly outcoached in the playoffs, getting so close, but not ever really making it to the promised land, which is the Super Bowl. And my grandpa always told me that close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right? And not in football. So that my thing is, man, we got to be able to like get over that hump. And if we can't do it with Harbaugh in the next 2 seasons, man, don't re-sign him. If I'm Steve Bisciotti, we got to move on. We got to try something different.
yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. When it happened, I feel like there's a lot of things in life and in sports where there might be a more logical decision, but it's just not the right decision, even if it might make more sense to do. And I feel like that's kind of how the Ravens felt with that situation towards the end of last year. Maybe we're in a better spot in the long run with Mike McDonald as the head coach. But, with Harbaugh being here since 2008, bringing us a Super Bowl, bringing us that culture that Dawson talked about, always in the playoffs as long as the quarterback's healthy. I just feel like it wouldn't have felt right. And also, I agree with what Dawson said, and I don't know if Zach and Sutton agree with this too. I want an offensive head coach. So I would have felt a little weird about hiring Mike McDonald. I think there would have been some excitement there. But at the same time, part of me was hoping they didn't do it because I want Lamar to eventually have an offensive head coach. You got Clint Kubiak on the Saints right now calling the plays. You got Ben Johnson in Detroit. You got Bobby Slowick in Houston. There's a lot of potential options in the future, and I think that'll be interesting down the line, seeing what happens. And I agree with you talking about, Harbaugh making the AFC Championship probably wasn't the best thing for him in terms of hot seat talk and all that. What game do you guys think? Like, let's say we end up finishing strong. Let's say we finish 12-5. Okay, let's say we have another great regular season after a terrible start, maybe 11-6. How far do we make it to where you guys personally would fire him, or you think the Ravens will? Let's say we win the division.
Me personally, trying to be unfiltered as possible, no bias. I think if you don't make the Super Bowl this year, I think Harbaugh has to go. I don't care if you make the AFC Championship. if we make the AFC Championship and lose, I think Harbaugh has to go, because at what point do you realize that you are just wasting? You have a two-time MVP candidate at quarterback, or winner at quarterback, and you haven't even sniffed a Super Bowl. I mean, at what point do you just got to say, all right, this is going to be tough, but it's our only hope of moving forward? And you got to fire Harbaugh and try to find a coach that you can come in and get this team to a Super Bowl. Is that, like, if he can't do it in 2019 and they can't do it in 23, after they already learned about what they did in 2019 and they do it again, is it ever going to happen? That's how I look at it. I think if we don't even make the Super Bowl this year, I think Harbaugh has to go, because I think you're just wasting a generational talent that you have at quarterback, and you haven't even made a Super Bowl appearance yet, and you're in year seven, yeah, of Lamar. So it's like, I know it's tough and it sucks and it's hard to think about life after Harbaugh, because he's been here, basically our whole lives, pretty much a large chunk of it. And it's hard to think about life after Harbaugh, but teams do it all the time and they become contenders. I mean, think about how many teams, cut ties with a longtime head coach, not recently, but overall, and then they become a powerhouse again. But the cool thing is we have Lamar Jackson at quarterback and we have a really good team. So I think realistically, any of those offensive coordinator candidates or anybody that we want as head coach, I think we're probably top the list if that time comes, as far as where they want to go. So that's a plus in my eyes, because I don't think we'd have exactly any issues trying to get a head coach to pick this location, just because we offer so much. But to answer your question directly, Brad, I think if this team falls short of a Super Bowl again, I think win or lose, no matter what, Harbaugh has to go.
What do you think, Sutton?
Honestly, I mean, I agree with what Dawson said. I really have nothing to add there. He needs to go. If we do not make the Super Bowl, like I was saying before, I mean, he didn't do himself any favors by making the conference championship last year, because now we're expecting to go one step further. And if we cannot and we keep falling short, then at what point do you just take the risk? And we've talked about so much how, like, it was the safe pick to stick with John Harbaugh, but like that's what the Ravens do. Like, their risk management, the philosophy there is not to take big swings, right? It's to stay comfortable in the culture that you got. And I can respect it because it's consistent. It's reliable. But if the goal is to win a Super Bowl, if that's the number one goal, then you have to be willing to do anything to get there. And that's including firing the head coach. The only caveat that comes with that, I would say, is his coaching staff. I think that would probably get, overhauled. Zach War might not last, to be honest with you, depending on the type of season that he has this year. If the defense is like kind of like middle of the pack, something like that, which technically it is right now with the number one run defense and the dead last pass defense, I think that somebody, whoever comes in at head coach, would want to get their guys in at certain coaching spots, and that would be a totally new look. It would be a totally new regime in Baltimore. But one thing I do want to say before we move on, do you guys remember on Christmas last year when we played the 49ers, and I think we got like a game sealing pick or a fumble or something like that. And they showed Mike McDonald on the sideline, and he was just like hype, walking up and down the
He was
sideline,
so
shrugging his
hype.
shoulders. I was like,
Yeah.
now, if that was the culture we had at head coach, right? A guy who's going to galvanize the troops, because that's what that did. That's what that type of energy does for our players, right? Any player. I think that would have been really, really cool to see. But wish him the best of luck in Seattle, and we'll see what Harbaugh can do.
I feel like the only way I personally would be okay with, or even be, in support of keeping Harbaugh around, maybe we have a rough regular season, get in as a 7 seed. If we win 2 away playoff games and get to the AFC Championship, I think it'd be rough to get rid of him. But I at the same time, I agree with what you guys are saying. So we will get into the final 2 questions here, but I'm going to combine them a little because they are similar. One's from Steen Logan, the other one's from 8 Walter. The first question was, if we start 0-4, can we still make the playoffs? The only team that has ever done it was the San Diego Chargers in 1992. Andy Rizzle let us know that the Colts made the playoffs in 2016 after starting 1-5. And then Bengals in 2022 made it after 0-2. Texans in 2023 made it after 0-2. And then just this other question. from Walter. Am I crazy for thinking we're going to win it all this year? Zach, you've been talking a while. We'll let you dive into all this right now.
Dude, first off, I love the stats for the starting 0-4. That was a freaking mess of things to think about. But like, they're saying there's one team ever that has started 0-4 and made the playoffs. And it's San Diego Chargers, of course, in a year that I wasn't even alive. Like that's not the greatest thing to see. I would say that if we started 0-4, playoffs is not in the picture anymore. It's mostly figuring out what life is going to be like.
We'll be looking at mock drafts if we're 0-4.
Yeah, it's going to be that type of season. It's that just doesn't seem fun. But also Walter here. Sadly, I have to say you are a little crazy for thinking we're going to win it all. It's hard to kind of put that stamp down right now. Like, I feel like everyone's kind of at an all-time low for this Lamar Jackson era, and it would be kind of like hitting rock bottom and then, climbing to the very top of the mountain. If there's one player I trust to do it, it's Lamar Jackson. But I think, sadly, I think it's a little crazy right now. I would love to have that confidence right now, but I just don't at the moment. And again, I said at the very beginning, it's the first half of the first quarter of the entire year. Like, anything can happen. But I love the enthusiasm, Walter. I freaking love it.
Yeah,
Dawson.
I think Walter, I love you, man, but I think you're a little crazy right now for thinking that. I mean, it's hard to find any sort of vision or hope for this team winning the Super Bowl right now, let alone winning a football game. I know we're overreacting. We're 0-2. It's a long season, but the Ravens mess around and win 2 games here. They're back to ground zero, 2-2, fresh season. From there, you're starting at 0-0 in my eyes, and you can do anything with that. So all it takes is this Ravens team to lock up their play and win the next 2 weeks, and we got a brand new season. And all this stuff we're talking about right now is absolutely behind us. If we start 0-4, can we still make the playoffs? Yes, you 100% can. Is the odds in your favor? No, not at all. That would be very hard to even think about or realistically make the playoffs if you start 0-4 because you have 13 more football games and you are probably allowed to maybe drop 2. And winning out, I mean, we saw it in 2019. We started the season 2-2 and then went 14-2. So we've seen it happen. The Ravens have ran the table before, and that is very hard to do, especially with questionable coaching. It all comes down to the entire team putting it together and playing winning football. And we've seen plenty of times before the Ravens tend to drop games they shouldn't. It happens every single season, a couple times at least. So it would be hard to have confidence in this team pulling off 12 wins out of 13 games or whatever it would have to be. Yes, it would be very, very slim. It would be hard to find hope. So if we start 0-4, I'm probably going to be looking at mock drafts. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be looking at next season. I'm going to be looking at head coaching candidates because I'm going to want Harbaugh fired out of a cannon out of Baltimore. So I'm just being honest. And I'm trying to find hope right now, but I agree with what Zach said. I think we can all probably logically agree that this is probably the worst we felt in the Ravens era. Or I'm sorry, as Ravens fans in the Lamar Jackson era, other than of course losing the AFC championship and stuff like that. This is probably the worst we felt about at least like having hope for the rest of the season. Like I don't think I've ever felt this worse about looking at a season and it's week 3. So yeah, I think you're a little crazy, but it's not over yet.
Yeah, man, I just want to say mock drafts in October is crazy.
Dude, it's September. It's gonna be mock drafts in September, bro.
Yeah, it'll be like the last day of September, like one of the last days of September if we end up going 0-4.
Can I just say real quick? I did look at a few today. That's all
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Tank for
Wow.
Travis Hunter.
Mentally there. That'd be wild. Do I think we can make the playoffs if we start 0-4? No, and the main reason I say that is because I don't see us winning our division easily. Like you said before, like we're probably going to end up splitting with the division, which isn't going to be good enough. If just simple as that, if we start off 0-4, like we cannot afford to lose these divisional games. The more outside of the divisional games we lose. So it's just no 0-4, absolutely not. And do I think you're crazy for thinking we can make the Super Bowl this season? Man, I guess that's kind of my answer is kind of predicated on what we do in these next 2 games based on my last answer. So the Super Bowl is lofty right now. When I'm just thinking about even like the low end playoff teams, right? That in the AFC, like let's just think about like the Chargers, who are Jim Harbaugh led now and running all over the place. And they still have Justin Herbert as well. Uh, And not even to bring up like the Chiefs of the world and the Bills who are starting off 0 I'm not 0-2, but 2-0, the Texans who are emerging. It's 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 just too much of a gauntlet. So I do think it is a little bit crazy to say we would make the Super Bowl if we started off 0-4, because like you said, we would pretty much have to run the table at that point. And that's just unrealistic. So yeah, I'd have to say that's a little bit on the crazy side, my man.
Yeah, my opinion on this is, we talked about it earlier, and when Dawson said it, it kind of clicked in my mind. If we're 2-2, I think we're gonna be back on top of thinking we can win it all.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about it. If we're 3-2, I was talking to one of my friends earlier today, like this afternoon, and I was like, if we're 3-2 after these 3 games, I think it's going to be more hype than if we were 5-0. Like obviously, you'd rather be 5-0, but that would be an insane run to go on. And then after having a couple easier games after these 3 games, I think if we're 3-2, that would be insane. And who knows, maybe we're 1-4, maybe we're 0-5. It's kind of exciting almost to think about. There's a lot of different ways these next 3 weeks can go.
Yeah.
I mean,
And just real quick, who do we have? You guys know off the top of your head, who do we have after
I'll check real quick.
the Bengals?
I got it right here.
Okay.
I just pulled it up as I was going to say something. So after the Cowboys, Bills, and Bengals, we have a really tough 3-game stretch. We are home against the Commanders. We go to Tampa, and we're
Right.
on the road in Cleveland.
And then home against Denver.
Tampa doesn't look too bad.
I mean, if the Ravens can get through the
Yeah.
stretch and win 2 of these, at least
Just
2
win
of these
2.
really tough games, they
Yeah.
could mess around and find themselves a few games over 500, at the
Yeah.
midpoint of the season. And we would be right back on track as we should have been, So who knows, man? There's a million different routes that we could see in the next 5 weeks. And I hope it's a good one because, I mean, who knows what's in store for this team.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add? Any final thoughts?
I do have one final question for you
Mhm.
guys. We haven't talked about this at all, but I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on it. Are you
Yeah.
guys in or are you out on Rashod Bateman right now?
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
I can go first.
Okay.
He's gonna be in.
I'm in, guys. I'm in. No, okay. So when we were doing our season preview show, we all picked a player that we think is going to break out, and I picked Rashod Bateman. I almost didn't even say his name. I almost I was going to talk about Travis Jones just because I didn't even want to. I feel like it's sort of like jinxing it when you talk about Bateman now. The drop turned into an interception was definitely rough. That's a 7-point interception, if not a 10 or a 14-point interception, because we were driving down the field. I don't know. It's just so weird when you think about those first couple games of 2022. It felt like we had a top 10 receiver. It felt like we had finally cracked the code, and this was our first, maybe even like all-pro receiver. And I know that feels like an exaggeration, but during those 2 weeks and after that Dolphins game, it was like, do we have a Pro Bowl receiver for like the first time ever? Like that's what it felt like. I don't have a strong opinion on him either way. I'm not on the side that's like, oh, he's going to end up having 1,000 yards. He's completely fine. But I'm also not – I also don't think he's a bust or anything like that. He has like 93 yards in these first 2 games. He made a clutch play against the Chiefs. I think I can answer that question a lot more in late October, early November. I think we'll know a lot more then.
All I'm going to say, keep it real short. I'm in, but the line is coming to a quick end, is all I'm going to say. I do like Rashod Bateman, and I believe in the guy, but he's not helping his case exactly, and it's getting very close for me to give up on him, and I do not want to because I love Rashod Bateman, and he was my favorite prospect in that draft coming out of Minnesota. Like, I wanted the Ravens to take him so bad, and I love the guy. I'm not giving up on him, but it's getting close.
Zach?
Okay.
I'm gonna be the bearer of very sad take here. I think I'm out. I everyone tells me, you know, all these stats also kind of show like his separation. Everything about him shows that he's supposed to be a good friggin' receiver. Like, I would love for him to prove us wrong. You know, freaking next week. Like, give me one game of 2022 Rashod Bateman week 1 and 2. Like, give me one. And we're probably all back on the train. It's just you don't see many NFL caliber wide receivers make that type of bobble. I mean, perfect pass right in his gut, making that catch, and you bobble it, and it turns out into a pick and eventually a loss. I'm not blaming him for the loss, but it's just like you can usually you can like 99 out of 100 times count on a elite, better than average wide receiver making that play. And
Odell's catching that 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah, it's just kind of like it's another sad thing. Like, I don't like to think about Tucker being in a decline right now, even though he is. But it's kind of like that type of thing where we believed so much in him and got off to such a perfect start, and to see it where it is now, it's just kind of heartbreaking. And man, I wish he would prove me wrong. Gosh, but everything in my body tells me that I'm out.
What do you think about the answer to your own question, Sutton?
Yeah, I mean, the curious case of Rashod Bateman, right? I mean, this is a guy who, and not in my Chris Collinsworth voice, this is a guy, or here's a guy who seems to be one who has all the skills. He has the tools, right? Like, he's a route running savant. He's got sneaky speed. He's got good hands, even though there was a miscue last week and he ended up dropping that football, which I thought was 75% on Bateman, because, if it hits you in the hands, you should catch it. But at the same time, I did think that Lamar kind of forced that one just a little bit. So I put like 25% on Lamar Jackson on that one. But I think that the biggest issue with Rashod Bateman is that him and Lamar Jackson just don't mesh well as quarterback and wide receiver. I know everybody kind of knows this. It's kind of been discourse for a while now, but Alex and I have been saying this for a couple of years now. Rashod Bateman is an on-schedule receiver, right? He's going to run his route, and if he's the first read, he's going to be open, right? Most time, 8 times out of 10, and you can throw the ball his way. But Lamar Jackson, number one, is not looking for Rashod Bateman first and foremost. He's more so looking for, okay, where are my tight ends? Where's Zay Flowers? And then also Lamar Jackson is more of a backyard football style quarterback. So, he's scrambling around, he's trying to find out who's open, but Rashod Bateman's standing around like, I got open 2 seconds after the play started. Like, you should have thrown it to me. And that's what's just so frustrating about it, because you can see, like, if you watch some of the all 22 footage, you can see plays where Bateman is just like burning his guy, sometimes even deep down the field. And Lamar's just simply not looking his way, or the play is just developing somewhere else. And I think that's just the biggest issue. If we ever were to move off of Rashod Bateman, I know we just signed him to a couple more years, but if he were to go somewhere else with a more, let's say he was with like a Tua Tagovailoa, I think that he would do damage, and I hope Tua gets better, but I think he would do damage with like a Tua Tagovailoa, or, maybe like a Jared Goff or somebody like that. I don't know. Or Aaron Rodgers. Oh my goodness, he would go crazy with Aaron Rodgers if they got on the same page. But yeah, I have to be in. I tend to be in on Rashod Bateman because, like I said, again, I know he has all the tools. I always hear stuff coming out of Ravens Castle talking about Lamar Jackson wants to be intentional about getting him more involved, and they're text messaging each other after the games, trying to get on the same page. And I like to hear that that sort of stuff, and it gives me hope. And Bradley, I kind of agree with what you were saying a couple of minutes ago, where it kind of feels like at this point, if you talk about it, if you talk him up, he's going to be non-existent. So I hate to even bring it up, but I just had to, since I'm having this conversation with you guys. I want to hear your opinions on Rashod Bateman. He's probably one of the more polarizing players on the Ravens right now. But yeah, thanks for you guys' answers on that one.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more thing there, and you kind of made me think of it, Sutton. Obviously, I'm not like wishing an injury or anything. Obviously, I would never want that. But my take would be, like, you talked about Lamar's looking for Zay and Andrews and Likely. I wonder what it would look like if our receivers were terrible all over again and just Bateman was just the only guy that Lamar trusted, I wonder what that would look like. I know in 2021 in his rookie season, we had a ton of injuries, and I felt like Lamar went to him a lot, on third downs and some more crucial situations. Then in 2022, it was kind of just like Bateman and Duvernay, right? And he was going to him a lot. So I wonder what it would look like if the other guys weren't there. That's kind of the only thing I wanted to add. If you guys have any thoughts on that.
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be interesting to see if he was touted as the number one guy. And
Yeah.
it was the only receiver, Lamar had if we didn't have Zay or we didn't have Likely. So if it was literally just Bateman, Andrews, and Derrick Henry, it would be very interesting to see that offense because it would almost be you have to force feed Bateman. If it was him and Nelly, Bateman would undoubtedly be the number one, and he would probably get at least 10 targets a game if it was just him and Andrews. And it's really all it is. I mean, he's not been able to establish any sort of chemistry or identity with Lamar yet, and it's been sad to see. But I feel like if they just put together a couple of good games together and kind of establish that trust and chemistry, we would see Bateman just take off. That's how I feel about it. I feel like this week against Cowboys, I feel like if Bateman goes out and has 112 yards, 6 catches on 7 targets, the best game of his career, I feel like the next week, obviously, he would have a heavy workload, and I feel like we would just see him take off if he has just 2 games back to back where him and Lamar can connect and make it work. That's all that we need right now. Because at the very least, if that doesn't work, then we can look differently. But I think they have not been able to get on the same page. I think once. I think that Miami game was the only one ever that there was any sort of connection. But outside of that, it's been very slim and just kind of nothing going on there.
Yeah, just one last thing. What was I going to say? I can't think of it. Does anyone else have anything? Well, I can try to think of it.
Not really. I'm a Rashod Bateman truther, man, but the line's coming to an end for me, man. It's getting tough because we drafted him 21, and it's it's 24 now, and it's we haven't even had one breakout game for Bateman, I feel like.
Yeah. Okay, I just remembered it. I don't understand why we don't get Bateman involved early in games. I feel like we're always throwing to a screen to Flowers, a jet sweep to Flowers, even multiple. And I think you need to get the ball in Bateman's hands. You talk about seeing the ball go through the hoop. I think that can happen with receivers too. Lamar needs to see Zay catch a pass. He needs to see Bateman catch a pass to feel comfortable with them later in the game.
Love that.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, 100% agree. Yep.
And then we'll talk about this real quick. Do you guys think we should have kept OBJ? I would say we don't know if it was him or the Ravens that didn't want to return. And also with him being injured on the Dolphins right now, I would go with a no. But I do think they're a little bit missing that possession outside receiver right now. But
I mean, it's hard to say because he's not even playing. He hasn't even shown up to the Dolphins facility, I think. So it's hard to even say if we should have kept him because who knows if he'd even be playing right now. His character and identity to the team, yes. But oh my God, hold on. There's no way this dude just said Willie Snead's available. I'm sorry. No. That's a no. I think you're just grabbing at anything at that point. It's just
I don't know if he's being serious.
He's definitely not.
Yeah. Was he great? No, Willie Snead's not happening, by the way. But OBJ, I don't think we should have kept him. I'm kind of glad. I mean, it sucked seeing him go, but he was here for the year. He did what he needed to do. He helped us get Lamar back. He established, a relationship with Lamar and Zay, and I think the ship just had to be sailed. And I don't think he really offers any true benefit or competitive advantage to this Ravens team. Making a couple catches a game, yeah, they're great, but it's overall he's not a top 50 receiver or whatever. So it's why waste the money because you're still gonna have to pay him a ton of money too.
Yeah. Zach or Sutton, any final thoughts or anyone have any final thoughts?
I agree with that. We wouldn't be getting the return on investment if we re-signed an Odell Beckham Jr. So yeah, I'm out on him.
Yeah. Well, before we get going here, Sutton, thank you so much for joining us for 80 minutes now. We kept you here for over an hour.
Sir.
All good,
Um,
all good. Thank you guys. This is a great conversation. Yeah.
yeah, let everyone know where they can find you if they don't already know you.
Yeah, you can find me on X or Instagram at Sutton Def. Is pretty much just spelled how it is down there on the little box there. And then, I have my podcast, The Purple Rain Podcast. Me and my co-host is Simply AS10, aka Alex. We go live every Monday and Thursday. You can find us on YouTube. Monday and Thursday around like 6:30, 7 p.m. So we're normally doing on Mondays our review episodes, on Thursdays our preview episodes. We drop YouTube shorts and everything like that. So yeah, if you want to, you can go ahead and subscribe to the Purple Rain Podcast YouTube channel, and that's Rain spelled Reign, by the way. But again, I want to thank all you guys for having me on. This is an awesome discussion, and like we mentioned before we even went live, just having these vent sessions about like the current state of the team, especially when they're losing, man, it's so therapeutic. So again, I appreciate you guys, and I'd love to come back on in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Yes,
coming
sir.
on. And we will see you guys later. Peace.